Thursday. We've been with Paul in Corinth. We've seen the same pattern that really characterizes this time in his ministry happen once again, where he preaches and teaches in the synagogues. His message is accepted by some and then rejected by others who stir up trouble in the local community, and then he faces greater and greater tension until he's got a choice to make. Where does he go from here? Does he flee and risk not getting into trouble, or does he stay? And at the end of his time in Corinth, we get this little throwaway line in verse 18 that has a lot of context around it that I want to try and give you this morning. In verse 18, it says, Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. Then he left the brothers and sisters and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Before he sailed, this is that throwaway line, he had his hair cut off because of a vow that he had taken. Okay, what the author is referring to here is most likely what's called a Nazarite vow. It was a common vow from the Old Testament era that really involved two things. One, whoever took the vow was not allowed to drink any alcohol during the limited duration of the vow. It was a timed thing that they were entering into. And then two, you weren't allowed to cut your hair. This is a vow that men and women could take part in, but it really involved those two stipulations. For a certain amount of time, you don't drink any alcohol and you don't cut your hair. And so what this is implying is that Paul is at the end of one of these vows. So why would he be making this kind of Nazarite vow? What does it have to do with what the story is in this chapter? Typically, these vows were a way of marking a time of dedication to God, or thanks for the ways in which God had provided and protected. And we definitely see that happening in this story, particularly as it relates to Corinth. If you go back to verse 9, this is after Paul has been preaching in the synagogues and trouble is being stirred up. It's that moment of, okay, well, what's going to come next? Is Paul going to be arrested? Is he going to have to flee? This is what it says. God comes to Paul in a vision and says, don't be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you because I have many people in this city. And it's that vision from God that gives Paul the assurances that he can remain in Corinth and continue doing the work of ministry and be safe. We don't know if maybe Paul was thinking about fleeing or leaving or moving on to the next city. We've seen that happen sometimes. But either way, it's likely that this is where Paul begins this Nazarite vow. And after a while, he's been in Corinth, he's seen this protection from God come to fruition. And now as he prepares to enter on the next phase of this ministry journey, he cuts his hair as a way of ending the vow. In traditional aspects of the Nazarite vow, you would end it by taking a trip to Jerusalem. And so it's interesting that that's exactly what we see Paul do. It's further evidence that this is what he's doing. And here's why I find that interesting. Again, the Nazarite vow is a way of saying thank you to God, of showing that you've been dedicated for his purpose. You've dedicated your life in this season in a really intense and profound way, to the point where you are making concrete changes in your life. No alcohol, no cutting your hair. These are things that are both internal and visible to your outside community. And I think it's interesting because, again, Paul physically changes his look at the beginning and the end of the vow. He doesn't cut his hair, and then now he does, as a sign of God's faithfulness toward the end of this vow. And I think I don't want to say any of us should cut our hair or not cut our hair. I do wonder what this looks like for us today. We don't need to enter into a Nazarite vow in the same way. I'm not saying you should sustain from alcohol or anything like that. But I do think it's worth spending 15, 20 minutes today, and really every day, getting down on your knees, a real physical reaction, a physical way of just showing God how grateful you are for his provision and protection over your life. It's worth getting down and spending time really, truly thinking about what are the ways that God has shown up in your life? How has he provided for you? How has he protected you? What are the things that you need to express your gratitude to God for? And is there a season of your life where God might be calling you to a greater level of devotion, Again, I don't know what that looks like. We have all kinds of things that we fast from or fast to, in an essence of picking up spiritual disciplines. But I wonder for you, what does that look like this week? At the bare minimum, spend some time this week, today, down on your knees, thanking God for the ways that He's shown up in your life. But maybe for you, it looks like something a little more extreme. Maybe it is a season where you abstain from something like alcohol, or games on your phone is one that I've done. Maybe it's just a time of greater devotion and dedication, of learning about God and giving up watching TV in the evening so that you can take on spiritual reading. I don't know what that looks like for you. But I do know that, like Paul, we are called toward seasons of greater devotion. And every day, we are called to be thankful for the ways that God has provided to us and communicated to us and guided us in our everyday life. So I hope that this little story, this one line that talks about what Paul is doing, is an inspiration to you to be able to do those things. We'll see you back here tomorrow.